Hello, little children. Okay, what we're going to do is some big writing now. So this is a 2-day task. Actually, I say 2-day task, it's a 4-day task. So Thursday, Friday this week, Thursday, Friday next week. And what I'm going to do is we're going to use the same YouTube video, PowerPoint, etc. But I'll give you slightly different information on Seesaw, and I'll tell you that information right now. So we're going to do warm up 1. This is going to be the big difference. We'll do warm up 1 this week and warm up 2 next week. Right, so because you're going to listen to, if you watch this video again, let me say that. So we're going to do warm up 1 on Thursday the 14th of May and warm up 2 on Thursday the 21st of May. Okay, so I'll put this out on Seesaw twice, once reminding you it's warm up 1 and once reminding you it's warm up 2, because you're going to do slightly different characters. So let me explain in full detail. Last week you wrote about a teacher. This week you're going to write about a pupil, and next week you're going to write about a pupil. Now you can think about these in two ways. So the pupils are the terrible twosome. Okay? You might want to make them twins. And the reason that you might want to make them twins is just because of the things that people can do when they look the same and other people confuse them. So they can play tricks on people and so on. If there's a funny noise, it's my cat. The cat was banging against the microphone. Okay, so it's up to you to decide if you want to make them twins. Because you can have a lot of fun with characters that look the same, or you can just make them friends and they look different, but they can still be a team. They can still be a terrible twosome. Okay, so character description, learning outcome. To write an expressive and detailed description of a character through his/her actions, dialogue, physical description, and lifestyle. This is the same as last week. And the same as last week, select an appropriate name for the character's personality. This time, instead of it being Miss So-and-so, Mr. So-and-so, it's just a name. You might want to also give them a surname. That is your choice. So you're going to describe the character's physical appearance, clothing, build, facial features, etc. If you're doing twins, they're obviously going to look the same. They may or may not dress the same, depending on how you decide to make your story run. So your character's include your character's actions, dialogue, lifestyle. You did that to really good effect last week. Use VCOP to enhance your writing, as always. You know my thoughts on capital letters and full stops, so bear that in mind. Use techniques such as senses, similes, metaphors, personification. You did that brilliantly last week as well, I should say, particularly with similes. I was really impressed with the fantastic use of similes. And remember to try and be implicit rather than explicit. So that means instead of saying the character is happy, show examples of the character being happy. Okay, so this is warm up 1. What are stereotypes? So stereotypes are when you judge a whole people group on a specific characteristic. And sometimes stereotypes are correct and sometimes they're wrong. So for example, people have stereotypes about Scotland. They're usually not particularly accurate. They say people in Scotland are stingy. They say people in Scotland or Glasgow are aggressive. So that's not particularly a good stereotype. However, and it's actually not true, but a stereotype that people also have about Glasgow is that it's very friendly, and that is true. And A lot of concerts that happen in Glasgow, people enjoy them very much because they say that the Glasgow audience is a good audience, and that is not that's a stereotype, but it's a true stereotype, and it's also a good stereotype. So sometimes good stereotypes are wrong, sometimes bad stereotypes are true, sometimes stereotypes are just completely wrong. And just because it's true so for example, Glasgow's considered to be a friendly city, that doesn't mean that every single person in Glasgow is friendly. Some people in Glasgow are shy, so they're not so friendly. So it might be true of Glasgow in general, but it's not true of every individual. Okay? So you might say a stereotype about girls is that they like the colour pink. Well, that is true of a lot of girls, but it's not true of every girl. And it's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just a thing. So a stereotype about boys might be that boys like like football. So that's true of a lot of boys, but it's not true of every boy. Not every boy likes football. And also a lot of girls like football. So some boys prefer other sports. Some boys are not that sporty at all. And that is actually the same with girls. A lot of girls are sporty. Some of them are not. Okay? So a lot of you are sporty and enjoy different physical activities. Some of you enjoy football. Some of you don't. Some of you like to run. Some of you don't. Some of you like to just sit and read rather than doing something sporty. And some of you don't. And none of these things are either good or bad. Okay? They just are. Okay? They're not good and they're not bad. They're just things. So you might find that using stereotypes can help you when you're writing a story. Okay? Why do authors use them? Authors use them because they help to build up a picture of a character. Okay? And well-known stereotypes are goodies and baddies from fairy tales. So a goodie from a fairy tale might be Prince Charming. So if you think about characteristics of Prince Charming, well, his name, for example, is Charming. And charming is a really nice word to describe anybody. It would be nice if somebody described you as charming. And then he's a prince. So he obviously is important, he's rich, he's powerful. So not only is often people who are rich and powerful, they're reckoned to be not nice people. That's a stereotype. Sometimes it's true, sometimes it isn't. But we know that this prince, this particular rich and powerful person, is also nice because he's called Charming. And we think of him as being handsome and strong and riding a horse, so he's fit. We don't know if he does other sports. We think of him as being well dressed, with nice hair, with a nice smile, and we think of him as looking for somebody to marry. Okay? Then a goodie, a female goodie from a fairy tale might be Cinderella. So Cinderella is what we call rags to riches. She starts off wearing rags and she ends up being wealthy because she marries the prince. And that story in itself is a kind of a stereotype. But it's a story that everybody understands. And because somebody starts poor, we often are happy in the story when we find out that they end up being rich. That is a natural human reaction. And again, Cinderella we think of as being beautiful. She starts off, she's dirty, but then she gets cleaned up and she's got beautiful clothes and her hair is beautiful, and so on and so on. And she's kind and she's warm but life is hard for her. So that's a goodie. Baddies from fairy tales. So we might think of as, for example, in Rapunzel, the witch is a baddie because she steals a baby and keeps her locked up in a tower. And there is absolutely nothing good about that. That is just plain evil. But we think of the witch as being ugly. We think of the witch as being having warts, wearing horrible clothes, being old, haggard, maybe not having teeth, maybe being a bit hunched up, bony, big nose, etc., etc. So, what I want you to do is to pick a goodie, one goodie and a baddie. None of the ones that I have picked, unfortunately. One goodie, one baddie, and describe them from any story, well-known story or fairy tale. Don't pick something from Horrid Henry, because I've never read any Horrid Henry. You could pick characters from Holes. Holes has got goodies and baddies. If you didn't want to use a fairy tale, because it's a story that we all know, and it's these goodies and baddies are quite clear who they are. There's a lot of goodies and a few baddies, but you can pick out whoever you think. Excuse me. And just jot down a few characteristics that would be considered stereotypes. Okay, so you can skip forward now. If you are in week 1 to the example. Okay, warm up 2. We can tell a lot about a character by their actions and facial expressions. On the next slide are different characters. Right, this is slightly different. So I'm just going to skip forward. Can you think of good verbs and adverbs to describe their movements? Can you think of nouns and adjectives to describe their facial expressions? So here's the list. Shy princess, glamorous model, bossy sergeant major, graceful ballerina, vain movie star, moody teenager, excited child, fearless soldier. So think of sort of short descriptive terms to describe them. These are stereotypes. Okay, even their names are kind of a shy princess, a vain movie star. These ideas, are stereotypes, but they're easy to describe, which is why they're often used in storytelling. Okay, let's look at the example. So here's an example. Horrid Henry. Now Henry, I'll read the description and then I'm going to tell you something about Henry. Henry was horrid. Everyone said so, even his mother. Henry threw food. Henry snatched. Henry pushed and shoved and pinched. Even his teddy avoided him if possible. So that's by Francesca Simon. Now, Horrid Henry would be considered what's called an anti-hero. So he's not a particularly nice character, yet he's the hero of the story. And that, you might say, that's kind of goes against the stereotype. And that too can be helpful in writing a story. Okay? So that's something to think about. It's a bit harder to write like that, but it's something to think about. Author's techniques. We are now going to read an extract from The Twits by Roald Dahl and examine the techniques he uses to describe Mr. Twit. You might have read The Twits, and if not The Twits, then some other Roald Dahl. So, Mr. Twit was one of those very hairy-faced men. The whole of his face, except for his forehead, his eyes, and his nose were covered with thick hair. Even the stuff even sprouted in revolting tufts out of his nostrils and ear holes. Yikes. Mr. Twit felt that his hairiness made him look terrifically wise and grand. But in truth, he was neither of these things. Mr. Twit was a twit. He was born a twit, and now at the age of 60, he was a bigger twit than ever. The hair on Mr. Twit's face didn't grow smooth and matted as it does on most hairy-faced men. It grew in spikes that stuck straight out like the bristles of a nail brush. How often did Mr. Twit wash his bristly, nail-brushy face of his? The answer is never. Not even on Sundays. He hadn't washed it for years. Mr. Twit didn't even bother to open his mouth when he ate. As a result of this, and because he never washed, there were hundreds of bits of old breakfasts, lunches, and suppers sticking to the hairs around his face. They weren't big bits, mind you, because he used to wipe those off with the back of his hand or on his sleeve while he was eating. But if you look closely, not that you'd want to, you would see tiny little specks of dried up scrambled eggs stuck to the hairs, and spinach, and tomato ketchup, and fish fingers, and minced chicken livers, and all the other disgusting things that Mr. Twit liked to eat. If you look closer still, hold your noses, ladies and gentlemen, if you peer deep into the moustachy bristles sticking out over his upper lip, you'd probably see a much larger objects that had escaped the wipe of his hand. Things that had been there for months and months, like a piece of maggoty green cheese, or a mouldy old cornflake, or even the slimy tail of a tin sardine. Because of all this, Mr. Twit never really went hungry. By sticking out his tongue and curling it sideways to explore the hairy jungle around his mouth, he was able to find a tasty morsel here and there to nibble on. What I'm trying to tell you is that Mr. Twit was a foul and smelly old man. He was an extremely horrid old man, as you will find out in a moment. So that's Mr. Twit by Roald Dahl. So, read through the examples of the extract and look for physical description, movements and actions, metaphors, similes, personification, different senses being used, adjectives and adverbs. Okay? So if you print this out, you can do that on the paper. If not, you just have to read it through. Now it's your turn. So you're going to describe twins. So this week, you're going to describe... Well, I've said that you can choose twins or friends. You decide. This week, you're going to choose one. And next week, you'll describe the other. So, you decide now. Are they going to both be nice? Are they going to both be nasty? Or is one going to be nice and the other nasty? Okay? Now, if you're going to do friends, it's probably easier if either they're both nice or they're both nasty. But if you're going to do twins, it might be easier to do one nice and one nasty. It's up to you. Also, you need to take into account your teacher. So if you've got a nasty teacher, you might want to have nice children. If you've got a nice teacher, you might want to have nasty children. And the reason that you might want to do that is because when you come to write your story, you'll have what's called conflict. And conflict is important for a story, because if you make your teacher nice and if you make your children nice, there's no conflict there. So you'd have to bring it something from the outside in to make the conflict. which is okay to do, but it's easier if you keep it confined, if you don't make it too complicated. Because if you have to bring an outside issue in to make your conflict, then what you're going to do is you're going to focus less on the characters that you've already chosen, if that makes sense. So say, for example, you've got a nice teacher, you've got nice twins, or nice children, but something bad has got to happen. Well, how are you going to make that happen if everybody's nice? You're going to have to bring in another character, a nasty character. So my advice to you is decide now which, if you've already got a nice teacher, then at least one of your characters needs to be nasty, or you can have both of them nasty. If you've got a nasty teacher, then you can have all your characters nasty, because there's loads of room for conflict there. What would be harder is to find a resolution. But if your teacher's nasty, you can have two nice children, you can have one nasty, one nice, or you can have all nasty characters. Okay, so you need to think about that. And if you're going to have one nasty child and one nice child, you need to decide now which one you're going to do first and which one you're going to do second. Okay, so we're going to do another mind map, and this is the bit that I need to see. Or no, I don't need to see it. It would be nice to see on Thursday the 14th and Thursday the 21st. I'd like to see your mind maps. And it's very similar to the one you did for your teacher. And then your success criteria, which again we've looked at. Select an appropriate name to reflect your character's personality. Describe the physical appearance, include actions, dialogue, lifestyle, use VCOP, use techniques, and remember to be implicit rather than explicit. And I'm very much looking forward to reading these, one on Friday the 15th and one on Friday the 22nd of May. I'm very much looking forward to reading these. Okay.